I'm resident of Collinwood, Joel Saints for YouTube. I'm here with Ansel Faraj, who is the writer and director of Todd Tarantula, which is a movie I watched on Tubi 3 times now. Really, really good. David Selby co-stars in it. He plays Lucifer Gray. So I have a question for you. When did you begin writing this?
I started writing it. I started writing Todd Tarantula Adventures, I should say, back in 2011. It started out as a short. There's 2 short films that I wrote. One was Westwood Village, which I don't know how familiar you are with Los Angeles, but I always envisioned these would be Los Angeles stories. So Westwood Village is a little college town where UCLA is based, and uh, I had this idea of this young punk named Todd Tarantula, and he's sort of trapped in Westwood Village, sort of like Louis Buñuel's film *The Exterminating Angel*, where a bunch of society people find themselves trapped in this house and unable to leave, even though there is nothing physically preventing them. They just are unable to leave. They can't bring themselves to walk out. So, yeah, Todd was trapped in Westwood and pursued by Lucifer Gray. And so you'd see them talking on bus benches and outside the Westwood movie theaters, which are kind of famous for various film premieres and whatnot. And then he would be rescued at the end by Barracuda after he's sort of confronted by his inner conflict that Lucifer is perpetuating. So then Barracuda would drive in and pick him up and they'd leave. And then I had another idea. It was called Dark Paradise, where uh, Lucifer takes Todd to hell. And hell was based on the Venice Beach boardwalk. And you'd have the Hell's Angels, the motorcycle group, as demons driving around. And then I just kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about other things and thinking about Los Angeles mythology and history. And I just started writing it as this elaborate feature film. And that's kind of where we finally have ended up with that story. So
That leads me to my next question. So, are there more because we meet a bunch of characters who have very special abilities, and they seem very much born with those abilities. Todd Tarantula and his time traveling, and being able to go back in time or forward in time. It seems he doesn't need his bike, but he is looking for his bike throughout the movie after it gets stolen. Um, and so my question is, are there other characters besides the one in the movie that we haven't heard of that have special abilities?
um there were other characters that got dropped. Just I mean the original script when we were going to make the film back in 2013,
Mm.
so that's 10 years ago. And it was a very different cast, and uh there weren't there was an undead soldier, and there was I had Detective Adam Sarah, who's been the focus of a couple short films that I made, and that are available on DVD as well. Detective Adam Sarah Chronicles. But Todd was the only Todd and Lucifer were the only gifted ones.
Yeah.
Um, so no, there was definitely other characters, but it wasn't like there was nothing where it's like the Avengers, where it's like
Yeah.
everybody has a thing.
The
Um, yeah.
Sorry, the
No,
reason
that's it.
the reason I asked that is there's a girl who has psychic abilities in your story
Or
too.
she claims to. She
Yeah, she
claims to.
claimed. Well, when you have a crystal ball,
But we
that's
never see what she sees.
right. We
We
see
only see what Todd sees. So
that's that's true. That's true. I like to think she saw, like, from my fan perspective. I apologize. We I I like to think because she tells him, "Go home, Todd. Just go home." And so when he's like, "Why?" and he picks it up and then he sees, his
he
dad. So
sees something.
he sees
Yeah.
something, right? And so he goes home, and his and his he hears his dad die eventually. But I like the fact that you have that sort of tease, even though you don't. You're right. You don't see what she sees. You don't see if she sees anything. You see Todd sees something. But I like the tease that she may have saw something.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
know.
mean, I have my own thoughts and perspectives on Andromeda, but I think it's better to let an audience make up their own decisions. Let the invite the audience into the story and the process, and like you've got your own conclusions about Andromeda.
Right.
Uh, so that's not for me to say what I think. I have very specific perspectives on everybody, and I would inform the actors of certain things, but I would tell them, you keep this to yourself. Only you need to know this.
Right.
So that's always been my process as a filmmaker.
With this, you also you do get Lucifer Gray, but you do get the character of Barracuda, who's missing one leg from a shark attack. So, was that inspired by a real person? Because there are people who lose their legs to shark attacks. Was that inspired by a real person at all?
No, Barracuda was always no Barracuda is inspired by like probably the kind of friend that I wished I had growing up. And I was just like, what's a he, even in the old script, he was just like this tough badass drunk,
Yeah.
but kind of funny, and I always just found it amusing that he made it through war. He survived war. He comes back and he gets his leg bitten off while he's surfing
Yeah.
by a shark, and he's still a fucking badass.
Yeah.
And so it's just so no, there was nobody that was directly an influence on Barracuda. I will say that 10 years ago when we were going to make the film, Nathan Wilson was cast as Barracuda back then, and he's the only one that retained his role 10 years later as Barracuda. So
Yeah, I was just saying, Nathan Wilson. I like the little lizard effects he had on his hands, the scales. How did you? So that leads me to my next question. Between the colorization in the film, which is really neat and wicked, how did you guys do the effects in the movie?
we just did them like he was in uh, like 3 hour makeup
Yeah,
session and wore a costume, and he had the and I mean, actually, a lot of the film was shot practically, so a lot of the film was accomplished in camera, and then yeah, in post production, once the film was edited and lost, we did rotoscoping over everything to give it this even further heightened comic book aesthetic, which I'd always intended for the project. But most everything was done in camera. We just did it. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I can't. I mean, yeah, I can't point to any particular thing that was like a crazy special effect. It was just we were there. There was no green screen or blue screen like was maybe an original production idea to accomplish. But yeah,
I like the fact that because with the weird effects, he has Todd Tarantula has a drug addiction. So you're sort of wondering how much is it the addiction and how much is it his ability to time travel.
mhm,
And I like how when Lucifer Gray tells him to go somewhere at night and it's very dangerous there, he takes Barracuda with him and they're standing there at night. And he there's moments in your film where Todd Tarantula doesn't realize that he went through time, which is really neat because
yeah,
again, for those who haven't watched it, spoiler alert, the drugs have affected him, somewhat to the degree he's not aware of when he
right.
does it, which is really cool. It's a neat little story. I like it. And so what I'm sorry, I'm trying to lead into my next question. I apologize.
Mm.
With 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 that, how did you like when did you distinguish, okay, because there's a moment in the film he does throw away the pills. His dad tells him to get off of it. He finally tells him the truth. When did you know Todd Tarantula wasn't going to be a drug addict no more as a writer?
I mean, when I wrote the original film, and I mean, because Todd was always an addict. Todd was always on neutron, smoking and doing various things. Originally, he would instead of pills, he would shoot up, and
Yeah.
it wasn't like heroin or something. It was like these chemicals, and he would trip balls and shit. So I mean, when I wrote the original film, at some point, things were happening. There was just even more stuff that was going on in that script, and I just had to streamline it down. It wasn't as focused as the final film is. But at some point, in the story, he realizes he needs to take control of his life, and if he's going to get through the crazy shit that's happening to him, he needs to come clean. So it was always part of the story's arc. So
I like how Todd Tarantula in the ride that Lucifer Gray offers him, he's questioned, "Are you really a businessman? Or are you really the devil?" So, and David Selby just like looks at him and smiles. And I love their chemistry together. They were really, really, really great. What was it? Was there any um, was there anybody else you considered for Todd Tarantula, or was the actor you chose always the choice?
no, we had like 600 some act. We had 1,000 submissions for that role, um, and then out of that, 600 actors auditioned, and then I narrowed it down to like 10, and then I narrowed it down to 3, and so the 3 finalists, I met with each of them, and then the guy that got it. Just he had this smarmy, full of shit attitude, and that's what Todd needed to have. And yeah, he was lucky.
He nailed it. That he did a really good job. I like how he played the character. Um, him and Nathan Wilson's chemistry was really, really great. Did they click right away?
There's a how do I say it? It's acting. It's acting. It's a lot of acting and directing and editing. A lot of editing. Um, he's very young. It's his first film. Um, he needs to remember always to cheat to the camera, which kind of drove me crazy as a director. Of no matter what is going on in the scene, if you are talking to a lizard, if you are talking to your ex-girlfriend,
Yeah.
here's the camera. Don't like that. Cheat to camera. So that was an interesting little hurdle we had to get through, and a couple other things. But it's acting. It's yeah.
I like that. Um, you also had a very interesting character named Lady Salome in your story, and she talked about an astral plane visitor, which is why she pricks Todd Tarantula across the face, and he screams like, "Ah, why'd you do that?" So she's able to see astral plane visitors, and that's what she thought he was. How did you choose? Like, you chose the city location, so how did you get the country setting? Very nice, by the way.
We just went outside of LA, and it exists. So we just, shot it. It's nothing. There's no crazy CGI or special effects. Everything is there.
Yeah.
So we just went out there, and we shot it. It was like our last 2 days of production. It was 100 degrees. Some people complained, some people did not, and yeah, it's just And Lady Salome went through a couple iterations. I also have very specific perspectives on her of how. I mean, she asks him things, and she asks Todd things, and then even she says yes. Even the the predictions that I tell the people in the pueblo, they're just guesses. I don't know what the future might hold. I don't know what things could be, but you can see things. You have this gift that the rest of us can only dream about.
Mm.
So, how much of what Lady Salome says is true or is just a con?
Yeah.
Um, you know,
It it sort of reminds me of what you're saying is how Houdini would expose mediums a bit
yeah.
in real life. Um, But back to your movie, really, really good. I like how you had David Selby as an astroplane visitor. Really cool effect. And he goes, "That young man knows me." And he's like trying to get Lady Salome to let her go. Todd Tarantulas, to be specific. And when he pulls, he's back in the present. He,
No, he's in another. He's in
oh, he's in the
another time frame of Los Angeles. Because if you look
really?
at the setting
Oh,
around it, it's even now that exists in LA. It's the very first buildings that were ever built in Los Angeles, the original Pueblo. So we're still jumping around for a minute there.
sorry, my apologies.
No, it's okay.
But he that's what I mean. He's back in like he's in Los Angeles, but he seems like he's in his time a bit, like back in the present. That but he doesn't seem to have like control at first with where he's going,
Right.
like which was I like because again these are powers that were suppressed by his mom's death, which is written in your story, which his dad suffers from too. His dad suffers from depression from his mom's death, which leads to decisions he makes. Um, Waller,
Wallander.
Wallander Tarantula. My apologies. He, I like the actor you chose. He's really, really good, and I like
Yeah.
how you had the effect of he. There was a hologram effect outside the house. What led into that decision?
Well, first of all, I hope that everybody watching this has seen the movie already. We're just like,
Sorry.
it's okay, it's all good. Spoiling. Um, uh, how did we do the effect, or what led to the idea of the effect? How we
Both.
did the, yeah, how we did the effect was Douglas Eames, who plays Wallander. I've worked with him several times. He was in one of my earlier movies, Dr. Mabuza, Etio Pomar, the second Dr. Mabuse is Christopher Pennick's henchman. Um, and how did we do the effect? I had Doug stand there and play the scene, and then he just started acting like something was weird, and we did some colors and very simple things, very simple effects. What led to the idea of the effect? I am very concerned about the world that we're in and where we're headed with artificial intelligence and with robotics and with
Yeah.
the metaverse, although I think that's successfully been killed. Um, but when I was like 5 or 6 years old, my dad got Blade Runner on VHS, and I watched it by myself. And this is, still the early '90s, and the movie starts off Los Angeles, 2016, and then the movie occurs, and I was just like, this is horrifying. I don't want to live in this world. This is what the hell. And so that that very that very much left a mark on me, and and ever I don't think I've ever recovered since. Although I do love Blade Runner and its sequel, to brilliant movies, but I don't want to live in that world. I fear for my nephew who's very young, and what kind of world we're moving towards. I fear for my future children of just like these things are not good.
Yeah.
Stuff isn't good. So anyway, I'll shut up now.
No, no. As a father of two, I understand where you're coming from because the one thing I try to do is take my kids outside. Like, there's a whole world out here. It's
Yeah.
not just like what we're doing, sitting across computer screens. But as parents, like kids, oh, I want my phone. Too bad.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. But
Exactly.
by the way, I only acknowledge the original Blade Runner because I'm convinced Philip K. Dick would have hated the Blade Runner sequel. And there's a reason
Yeah, probably.
the reason I say this. He was very complimentary of David Peoples. He believed David Peoples saved the Blade Runner script, and out of the writing team, who didn't return? David Peoples. But well, yeah, but So yeah, I acknowledge one Blade Runner movie. My apologies to anyone who likes the sequel or who watches it. But this movie is great though. Todd Tarantula. I enjoy this. This is really good. If you make a sequel to it, I'm watching it.
I'm not. I'm definitely not making a sequel. It's
No,
not happening.
no.
Not happening. I went through enough on this one. It took me 12 years, and then it was enough just making it. I don't need to do it again. I'm doing right now a comedy that we've also been working on for almost 10 years, and called The Great Nick D. And we've got David Selby and Catherine Lee Scott and Lisa Richards and a few other familiar faces. And yeah, it's been a lot more fun, a lot more rewarding, I'll say. Todd Tarantula making it was nice in that it was, I knew it would finally exist and I wouldn't have to wonder about it and think, is this thing ever going to happen? Is this thing just going to end up like a short story or a comic book, or is it going to be one of those movies that's just like a pipe dream? And it exists. It's been a huge like burden and relief off my chest, but I do not want to go through it again and deal with it. And some stories, you don't need franchises. Some stories are best left told, and then
Yeah.
you can go back and revisit it if you want more of that world. But no, I'm not making a sequel. Guarantee you.
Well, from a fan's perspective, it looks like you guys had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, some people did.
I really enjoyed how Lucifer Gray, David Selby, talks about Wallander, and he knows everything about Todd Tarantula because he's had conversations with Wallander, uh, Tarantula, and Todd Tarantula has not been interested in the family fortune.
Yeah.
Is it? And now I won't spoil this. But I will ask how much of his mother's death influences both Todd and Wallander's decisions.
Oh, I'd say it was everything. It was everything. That was the moment that, and there was more in Wallander's monologue in that sequence where we did learn a little bit more of how painful and how awful it really was. And I cut it because I was like, I want to have a film that's a good time. I don't want to just like as I said, you want a sequel, you enjoyed it so much, and thank you so much for
That's really
having
good.
watched it 3 times, and that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to make a hangout film. We just got out of a pandemic. We've just been out of some crazy shit. I wanted to do a fun movie, fun for the audience, a fun movie, a good time, a hangout film, kind of like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You're just hanging out with these people and not just overburden you with misery. So there was a lot more pain that Wallander described of his wife's death and why he, in a way, blamed Todd for the death. But I mean, that broke both of them. Todd never knew the mother, and Wallander, every time he looked at Todd, he just saw the mother and
Yeah.
you know couldn't cope. So
You
yeah, it changed everything
you
for both
still
of them.
like to me, like from my perspective, you still get that though in this movie with Wallen, with the actor that
Yeah,
played Wallen and the actor that played Todd Tarantula. You still get that sense though from them
yeah. That's
when
why I cut all that other extra monologue because like we get it, we can move on.
right. Yeah, that's what sorry.
No, no, no.
But you do get that across, the actors get that across really well, your story with their facial expressions and their words, like when they're not saying it's not just when they say something, it's when they don't say something,
Exactly.
which is really good. um you've made a lot of movies. So
Yes.
how many have you made total?
I don't know. I've been doing this since 1997, man. I don't know. My parents gave me a camera for Christmas after I begged and begged and begged and pleaded when I was 6 years old, and then I got one, and I've just been nonstop since. But how many have I made in a professional capacity? I don't know. Dr. Mabuza was my, well, no, technically I did a comedy, Brother Drop Dead. That was the first time that I worked with Nathan Wilson, and I had my mentor in it, Lyndon Childs, who was in a couple student films for me when I was a kid. Um, and so I did Brother Drop Dead. That was 2011, 2012, and then Dr. Mabuza was the first, and that was rather terrifying because all of a sudden Jerry Lacey, Catherine Lee Scott, and Laura Parker are sitting at my dining room table, and I was 20, and I was just like, all right, how did this happen? But cool, and um, learned a lot, learned a lot on that, and then we did a superhero film not too long afterwards. Catherine Lee Scott and Lyndon Childs came back and played characters in that. The Rising Light, and that one, in my all, in my truth, honesty, it's not very good because I was at a precipice. I was still in like student movie thinking, and also starting to realize this is, to quote Rosemary's Baby, this is really happening. This is
Yeah.
actually for real now. So um, it's, I can see that I was changing there, and the evidence is there, and I don't think it's a very good film. Other people might disagree with me, but and then right after that we did Dr. Mabuza 2, and Chris Pennick was involved, and it was a big film, big cast, a lot more lessons. That script changed like every day because various things that were going on. Um and and yeah, I was very young when I was making those, and just really figuring out how to tell stories properly and how to make a film properly. Also, I was by myself. I didn't have crew. I never had money, so we were in my garage that I had converted into a sound stage, and very small, very small grassroots independent filmmaking, and I learned innumerable lessons. I never went to film school. These things were my like graduation pieces. I think of them as, because I just learned incredibly much on those. And then yeah, then I found a groove, and Jerry Lacey and Nathan Wilson and I did the H.P. Lovecraft inspired noir, The Last Case of August T. Harrison, and I'm proud of that one. And that went to many film festivals, and people still tell me that they've been affected by that. It's another father son story like Todd Tarantula. And should I just keep rambling, or you can
Oh
ask me?
no, go ahead. You can talk.
Yeah. So in between that, we also had season one of my anthology series, Theater Fantastique. Was sort of like Chris Pennock was the head of the show, and everybody kind of came in and out and played different roles, and we did different stories, and some were based on Edgar Allan Poe, things that I'd wanted to do since I was a kid, and some were just original concepts. And Jerry Lacey and Laura Parker and Lisa Richards were guest stars. Sally Kirkland was a guest star. Um, Built a little more of a repertoire company on that. And then Todd Tarantula was supposed to happen, and somewhere in there, the money fell apart. A bunch of hell on that. And what else did I do? I did the Detective Adam Sarah series, which is 5 installments, we'll call them. Um, and that was based on this sort of comic book mythology that I developed when I was a teenager because I really loved Batman as a kid. And and oh, and it was kind of funny because then I saw Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, and I was like, wait, this is totally my plot for like the last 2 installments of Marvel. They ripped me off with some of the things that happened in those. But what else did I do? I did The Nighttime Winds, which is a black and white gothic haunted house thriller that I had dreamt when I was in the 7th grade, and I always just kind of thought about it, and I said, well, let's make it. It's not that difficult to do. And then I was like, I'm tired of horror. I need to show that I'm more than just a thriller guy. So we did Will and Liz, which is a film that is maybe it's my favorite film that I've made.
Yeah.
It's a love story, and there's a very small, very simple, and just truth and human emotion, and was an incredible breath of fresh air. I love that film. And it's streaming on Amazon, it's streaming on Tubi, it's on Blu-ray. All of these films I'm mentioning you can access. They're either on DVD or they're streaming, so it's not like they're out in the ether. And then right
Mm.
after that, we went into to make Loon Lake in Minnesota with David Selby and Catherine Lee Scott, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I watched that one too. I like how David Selby plays two different characters. He plays a preacher and he plays Nathan Wilson's neighbor, who's
Yeah,
descendant from the preacher. Very, very supernatural, very psychological movie. Really good. Loon Lake. When we get done, I'm going to leave a link to where you can get Loon Lake, Dr. Maboo, and obviously Todd Tarantula in the description box. You guys, you did do a Dark Shadows Christmas Carol.
we did.
When did you decide to do that?
I actually had been thinking about it probably after second Doctor Mabuse, because it was something that Dan Curtis had mentioned back in 2000 of like, I wish that we had done this on the show and we never did. And now I was like, well, hell, I'm directing the alumni. What if we did a Christmas Carol? And then I was like, I should focus on my own original concepts, and you know maybe some things are best left just to the imagination. And then um was that right? Yeah, it was right at the end of the tail end of the pandemic, or the shutdown, I should say. And um Catherine mentioned to me, because we had done the previous Halloween, we had done sort of a cast reunion for Halloween on Zoom.
Yeah.
And so everybody's like, "Oh, you should do it again. You should do it for the holidays. You should do it." And so Catherine mentioned, "Oh, maybe we should do something for Christmas." And then Richard Halpern called me and he said, "Let's do Christmas Carol on Zoom, and we'll get everybody." And so we had like 25 days in between that phone call and then the date that was marked for the performance to get everybody together, to get the script together, wrangle, Mitch Ryan and David Hennessy down in South America, and all kinds of stuff. And then we did it, and we run the rondo for best event, and yeah, that was we all of us worked very hard. We had to work very quickly, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry if you
we
hear
did
my
it.
son in the background.
It's
Um,
okay. I get children. My nephew runs around and screams, and I've taught him how to howl like the wolf man. I totally get it.
I had my kids do that when they were a lot younger. We did it at a movie theater once. When the movie was full. You're a Dark Shadows fan like myself. So out of all the fictional characters that have come and gone in horror, who would you bring to Collinsport? What fictional character?
Uh, I have no idea. So Stuart Manning just published this brilliant publication, Daytime Gothic, um, and it's a very smart, intelligent, refreshing look at this show. And there was only a limited number of copies, so if you didn't get a copy, yeah, I'm sorry. But Penny Dreadful, she wrote this great essay in there about like what would, if the show had continued, what would have been some cool storylines they could have done. And the one that I still kind of think about is how she pitched it was brilliant. Was doing Phantom of the Opera,
Yeah.
but doing it with the Dark Shadows twist. And so, because Phantom of the Opera was the thing that got me involved in filmmaking, in story, in show business, we'll call it, because not just filmmaking, but even theater and all that. Long before even Dark Shadows. Um, so yeah, her idea for how to do Phantom of the Opera in in Collinwood was really cool. I kind of would like to see that.
Yeah, yeah. Phantom of the Opera is very old school. I like that. Um, when did you first get into Dark Shadows?
My mom used to tell me about this. I mean, she didn't even tell it like a show. She would just tell me stories
Yeah,
of the various storylines. There was this vampire, and he was locked in a coffin, and then there was this guy, and he was named Willie, and he was looking for money, and he let him out, and then this, and then da, 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 da. And she had Catherine's first book, My Scrapbook Memories of Dark Shadows, that she published in 1986. And my mom is a first generation Dark Shadows fan. Everybody says, I ran home from school to watch Dark Shadows. Well, my mom ditched class to watch Dark Shadows. So she had it, and it was autographed by Jonathan Frid and Catherine. And so finally, at some point, when I was probably like 4 years old or something, she got it down off the shelf, and she was showing me the book, and I would see the photos, and that then got me. It awakened me to the fact that what I would watch on television wasn't just actually happening.
yeah,
So, like when I was a kid and we watched Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and the guy chose the wrong cup and he melted, like that was real. That guy, like he died on screen to me. I was like, oh my god. But this, there's this house or this like living room, and there's cameras, and then there's a control booth, and there's no ceiling in the. So I started. Oh, this thing is made. Like they make stuff that I'm watching on. It's not, just happening, and somehow it ends up on my television. And because I was really young, so what the hell do I know? But it 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 got me interested in filmmaking, and it got me interested in just like these cool gothic scary looking photos, especially the photos from House of Dark Shadows. And it being House of Dark Shadows being a movie, it was a much easier concept to digest.
yeah.
So at some point right around there when I was 4 or 5, the videotape for House of Dark Shadows was released, and my mom rented it. And weirdly enough, she'd never seen the movie, and I still can't explain that one to this day. And I asked her, like, how the hell did you see the Dunwich Horror at the drive-in, but you never saw House of Dark Shadows? I don't know, but she never saw it, so I was left alone in a room. Uh, Actually, it was at my parents' friend's house, and as we know, that movie is very intense, and I don't know pretty much. I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I don't really know who the characters are. The music is like pounding and thunderous, and it's a violent film, and I got up to them staking Carolyn, and then I had like left the room. I'm just like rattled by it, and I got my mom, and I was like, this is scary. She came back in, and she saw what was going on, and the blood is shooting out of the stake, and she's like, oh, I don't remember. This isn't like Dark Shadows that I know. The videotape came out. So I was left rattled and wanting more because it was just like so visceral, and something it was a little mature for my 5-year-old mind to handle. But then I kept thinking about it. Especially kept thinking about when they staked Nancy, and how did that blood come out? And how did they do that? And that's like, so just the mechanics behind it. And I never saw the ending for like 3 years. And then the arrows coming out of Jonathan Frid and all that crazy shit. I was just like, oh, this is cool. So that was what I first saw, and then we started getting the tapes of the show from Hollywood Video, and I distinctly remember the videotape of when they go back in time, and it was the whole build up, and then they're gonna have the seance because they're gonna contact Sarah, and the tape ended with Vicky, where she's gone back, and she's like, where am I? And then the end of the tape, and I was just like, wait, what happens now? And yeah, I was cursed then.
Yeah. My mother, who owned a video store, she
Oh,
decided,
lovely.
yeah, she decided to show me and my brother John Carpenter's Halloween when we were 9 years old. Oh,
9 years old's fine. That's a fair
my,
age, I think.
my brother was 9, I was 8. I was the run of the two. And he, she's like, "Here, watch this. You need to watch this because somebody else will show it to you." And from then on, it was like a crash course of horror.
Yeah.
And then my mother left me to myself. And then I'm watching Dark Shadows, and it was airing on the Sci-Fi Channel. And I
Yeah,
was like,
that's yeah. Thank God for Sci-Fi Channel.
right,
Right around there at the same time.
yeah, Victoria Winters. And so I'm telling my mom, she goes, "What are you watching now?" Because I'd watch all this other stuff. I'd watch Hellraiser, I'd watch the Hammer movies, I'd watch the
Yeah.
old 30s movies and shit. And my mom's like, "What are you watching now?" I'm like, "I'm watching this show called Dark Shadows. I really like it." She goes, "Yeah, did the vampire show up yet?" And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like, she knew. And I'm
Oh yeah.
just like, I'm like, "Mom, thanks for spoiling that for me." But yeah, she was a good corruptible soul. When did you guys when you did scores on Todd Tarantula? When did you guys decide the music?
That's an interesting story. I'll, I mean, um, you edit the movie's put together,
Yeah.
and then it's time for the rotoscoping and the sound design and the music. And the guy who did our sound design, he also did the music, and so it was just kind of at that point, he just happened there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It went with the movie really well. From the fans' perspective. It really did. I like how David Selby and Todd Tarantula ride on the bike together, and how Lucifer Gray has modified the bike a bit,
yeah.
uh, so they can go together in time. But Todd Tarantula tricks him. I won't completely spoil the end for those who haven't seen it yet, but it's really, really good. Is there any? I'm out of questions for you. I apologize, but is there
Yeah.
anything you want to add about the movie?
Oh, I mean, there's plenty that I could say, but it's. I'm happy that people enjoy it. I'm happy that it exists. I'm happy that people enjoy it. I'm grateful that I don't ever have to think about it again. Um, because I've wondered about it for a long time. I mean, this was a sore spot for me, especially when the film fell apart the first time. I was like, this is a movie. I was much younger, and I was like, this is a movie that can show I don't just do Dark Shadows. This is a this is an R-rated crazy acid trip of a film. And I, I've and now why especially now where it exists, I made it still to show it's not Dark Shadows. It's not, honestly, the brutal opinion is it's not for the Dark Shadows crowd. It's I made it for the younger crowd, a younger generation, a whole different audience. Um, and there's kids out there that will totally dig it, and it's the kind of movie that I would have wanted to watch growing up as a teenager and in my early 20s. I mean, really as a teenager. And people, I'm very, people have messaged me, or I've read reviews and stuff, and I've gotten like the best reviews of my film career with this movie. So it's very gratifying, and it I've got that closure because I was very brokenhearted for a while there when
Yeah.
the movie just like would not did not want to exist. And that's a funny thing. I think certain things, they're supposed to happen when they happen, and like the movie did not the movie was not ready to come to life until maybe I was ready. I was in the right spot as an adult, as a filmmaker, um, to know how to give it its best opportunities to tell its story. Does that totally make sense, or does that sound like some crazy batshit thing that I just said? I don't know.
No, I write blog stories, so like there's times like there's one story I didn't want to write, but I ended up writing because I dreamt it. I was writing two Dark Shadow stories at one time, and my daughter was sick,
Hmm.
and I fell asleep next to her because she wasn't feeling well. She's a lot younger at the time, and I ended up dreaming I was sitting in a car, and I was in the passenger side, and it was snowing. Now I live on the East Coast; that's nothing new to me. I'm like, where am I going? And I look to the driver's side, and I see Josh Hartnett. I'm like, what are you doing here? and it
Underrated actor, by the way.
Yes, and it was his character John Tate. I knew
Okay.
who I knew who it was, and I'm like, "What are we doing?" He goes, "He's coming." I'm like, I know who he was. I knew it was Michael Myers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he
Yeah. Yeah.
crashed.
Yeah.
He crashes the car in my sleep, and his nose is busted, and we're walking together in the snow, and I see this town. I'm like, it looked like a village on a sea. I'm like, where the hell are we? And he points his flashlights up, and it says Collinsport, and I woke up. And I'm like, no, no, I'm not doing it. And then I end up writing it.
Yeah, you got me think. How old are you? You mind my asking?
I'm 40.
Okay, so we're not that far off. I'm kind of coming up behind you. Yeah, because you said Josh Hartnett, and I'm like, okay, we're we're of a certain generation that watched certain things when we were younger. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Halloween H2O. That was a big movie when that came
yeah,
out, and
yes, it
I
was.
wasn't supposed to see that, and my sister and I went and saw it, and she's like, "Don't tell mom," and that was a good movie.
Yeah, with my mother, it was like, Mom, I'm gonna go see Halloween H. I don't give a shit. Uh,
I had to wait to see The Exorcist.
I
Like
had
there was like you said you were watching Hellraiser. I'm not a Hellraiser guy. I've seen the first one and I was like I don't like this. It's just I don't like it. It's not my kind of thing. But like The Exorcist, I've had to wait years and years and years, and I really wanted to see it, and I'd see little clips of it, and it just made me want to see it all the more. And I finally saw it when I was in the ninth grade. I made my high school sweetheart actually at the time buy it for me for Christmas because that was like the only way that was gonna like happen. And so we watched it like Christmas Day, which is kind of blasphemous. But yeah, I had to. There's I was allowed. I was House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows aside, I was allowed to watch the Universal Monsters and the Hammer films, and but my sister and I went and we did sneak off to go see Halloween H2O, and I had fun.
the first Halloween I saw in theaters was Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. My
Okay,
mom was taking us on
with
vacation.
Mitch Ryan.
Yeah, with Mitch Ryan. And I was telling Daniel Ferens this, who I interviewed on here as well. He, my mom, I saw it in where it was advertised on theaters. I'm like, Mom, please, please. She goes, all right, we'll go before we go on vacation. And I saw it going, and I saw it coming back from vacation. And thank you, Mother. So I really enjoyed it. So I've seen, let's see, 6, H2O, Resurrection, Rob Zombies 2, and 2018 all in theaters.
Yeah,
Yep. The last two I didn't. I saw on stream.
yeah. I watched. I did see Halloween Kills at the or no, not Halloween. Halloween Ends at the movies,
Yeah.
and the music was good. I'll
Yeah.
say that. The music was really good. I'm not like being an asshole here. Like the music was actually good.
No,
Um,
that was it. That was all that was good. I mean, I'm
that was
sorry.
all that was good. Yeah, it was. Other than that, it was kind of like I
No,
had many questions.
you're not the only one.
I know.
There's a long list, and I'm in that line. Um, I'm going to go to hell before I get an answer. But no, really great movie. I enjoyed Todd Tarantula.
Thank you.
I actually bought it off Amazon recently.
Thank you. Thank you for supporting.
Really good. I enjoyed. I know we're not getting a sequel, but I enjoyed it.
No, no
Um,
sequel.
no. I'm gonna message Ansel to the dad. Hey Ansel,
You
can
won't be
we?
the only one. Like numerous people have said, "Oh, this is we gotta see what happens next," and I'm like, why? Like,
I'll
just
just
what do you think happens next? Like, that's better. Like, you come
I'll,
up with your own. I mean, not you're,
right,
I'm not
right,
expecting somebody to go off and like make a sequel because I will sue their
right.
asses. But like, in your own mind, what anything that you can think up. I mean, I'll admit I've had a couple ideas of like where it could go or what could be another story, but it took so many years to get this one going. That it's like
I'll send a picture of a motorbike. Um,
that damn bike.
yeah. The fact that he at the night scenes were really creepy, by the way, which I like. I love your night shots, but with your day, but really, really good. And I love Nathan. Again, my favorite part is when Nathan Wilson's bar fight is one of my favorite scenes, and then when he
That
appears,
was fun to do. Now that was fun to do.
yeah,
I will say, because it's like we never get to do like crazy stunts like that. And we had a stunt coordinator in there, and I said to John Nickton, who's the stunt coordinator, I'm like, the only thing that like I want is he needs to kick one guy in the head with his metal leg. But other than that, like you can like just do some crazy shit,
yeah.
and we'll do it. And so John Nickton as the stunt coordinator. He's a super nice guy, super cool, and he just went to town with that. And I know Nate was like, "Oh yeah, I get to be the action hero right now," And we had fun, and that was a nice set that we had. That was a cool fun day. That was like early on in the schedule.
Links to Todd Tarantula, Dr. Mabuse are going to be in the description box where you can get those on Amazon. I want to first of all thank you for giving me your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun talking to you about this movie and Dark Shadows. But thank you, Ansel, and have a good day, man.
You too. Thank you again.
Take care. Bye.